This week on Illegal Aliens, Kyle is injured for 2 weeks of basketball season, and he also apologizes. Max regifts to his own mother, and just what does West Roswell High do with woodshop projects? Be careful with that bottle of vegetable oil because we're looking at Toy House, episode 11 of season 1 of Roswell. I'm Chris.
And I'm Claire, and this is Illegal Aliens, a Roswell podcast. Toy House first aired on January 19th, 2000.
It was written by Jason Katims, who we last saw writing in episode 9, Heatwave, and John Harmon Feldman, who we last saw writing episode 5, Missing.
And Toy House was directed by Michael Fields. This is the only episode of Roswell that Fields directed, but his first television direction was for American Playhouse in 1985, and more recently he's directed episodes for Veronica Mars, Gossip Girl, and iZombie. And Toy House also has the distinction of being one of my favourites from the first season, so let's start the recap.
Okay. Max's mother Diane cooks dinner and asks Max questions about his homework, which leads to some questions about Liz. A spilled bottle of oil catches fire, and Max uses his powers to save Diane, putting out the fire, and he spills a pot of water on the stove as an afterthought.
Afterwards, the fire department and Valenti take turns visiting to make sure that they're all okay. Hearing the details, Valenti gets suspicious but covers with a grin and suggests that Max has a future as a fireman.
When Max tells Isabel, they both worry about the danger of either Diane or Valenti exposing their secret. Isabel reassures Max about Liz, saying he was right to put the brakes on his relationship, and Max says everything is good there.
Diane finds a home video in which a young Max chases and then heals a pigeon. Isabel walks in on her watching this, and Diane asks probing questions about Max and his private, secretive side. Even asks if Isabel's seen Max doing anything unusual. Isabel turns and asks Diane if anything's wrong, and she says she's still shaken up from the fire.
Valenti drops in to visit with Diane, mentions the shooting, and drops off a pamphlet on fire safety, circling key facts that puncture Max's explanation of how he put out the kitchen fire.
Max is painting over the scorch marks from the kitchen ceiling when his mother appears, unable to sleep. She asks again how he put out the fire, and when he mentions the pot of water, she points out that water will spread a grease fire, not stop it. She asks what he really did, but before he can say, Isabel reappears.
Out walking, Isabel tries to convince Max that they can tell Diane the truth, especially as they've now crossed the line between hiding the truth and actively lying. Isabel thinks it could bring the family closer together, but Max doesn't agree. Frustrated, Isabel tells Max it isn't his decision alone.
Before school, Diane asks Isabel what she can remember from before the adoption, pointing out that as 6-year-olds they must remember something. Isabel tells her memories of Diane coming to take them home, and says that their lives started on that day.
Valenti shows Diane his report on the crashdown shooting, which includes Max fleeing the scene. He also hints at the idea that Liz was shot and Max healed her. Diane does her best to laugh it off, but later returns to the pigeon video. She presses Max for answers, but he refuses to discuss it, then accuses her of investigating him and Isabel both, and storms out of the house.
At the quarry, Michael argues to destroy the videotape, and Isabel again says they can trust Diane with the truth. Michael says that puts all of them in danger. They argue, and Isabel storms off by herself.
After speaking with Liz, Max meets his mother at the park. They talk, and Diane suggests that it's time for Max to look for his biological parents. Max tries to reassure Diane that she is the only mother he needs. She begs him to tell his secret, but instead he gives her his toy house that she gave to him once when he was struggling to feel at home in her house. Now Max tells Diane he doesn't know where home is, but he does love her, and that's the important thing.
Back at the quarry, Max apologizes to Isabel for arguing and reassures her how everything will be okay for Diane. Her spirit leaps with hope that he's told their mother the truth, and when he says he didn't, Isabel cries. Max comforts her and reminds her that they have each other, and as long as that's true, everything will be okay.
Meanwhile, at the crashdown, Maria asks Liz about the breakup with Max, and Liz assures her she's fine. It was 90% mutual. She can even go to the basketball game with him. No big deal, a casual thing. At the game, Liz is loudly cheering Kyle on when he falls and injures his leg.
Liz takes a crashdown pie to Kyle's house, which Max notices uneasily. Liz also brings Kyle study notes and says she's sorry about the ankle, but Kyle doesn't want to talk about it.
Later, Kyle returns to the crashdown, declaring that Liz is struggling with big guilt. He even exaggerates his injury to demonstrate how Liz has responsibility for something that's not her fault. Liz admits that she now has more sympathy for how it feels to be the one dumped in a breakup, but Kyle says that Liz was straight with him and apologizes for how difficult he made her life afterward. They laugh and agree to be friends.
Max tells Liz that it's okay if she gets back together with Kyle, surprising her because that's not what's happening and she wouldn't need his permission anyway. She tells him that he can be controlling and needs to let the people around him help, which gives him insight about what to say to his mother.
Also, Maria is struggling with a woodshop saw when Michael tries to give her advice and compliments, while mistaking the nature of her project. They snark at each other, and Maria admits she is upset because she risked so much to save his life. She had to see him celebrate with Max and Isabel, but didn't even get a thank you. Michael says thank you, but Maria tells him it's too late.
Later, Michael shows up disgruntled and tells her that her request for an apology is a tactic. They wrestle over the napkin holder, break it, and Michael swears to fix it. Later, Maria finds the napkin holder complete in her locker with the charming label note. But instead of turning it in for the class assignment, she finishes one all on her own at the last minute and takes Michael's to keep as a thank you. Michael tells Maria not to help him the next time he gets an alien sickness because he needs to be strong by himself.
Right. So is there anywhere you'd like to start the discussion?
I don't know. I mean, I think it struck me as I was rewatching for the podcast that there's a lot going on with that sort of theme of giving and of receiving, and how much easier it is to give to someone else than to receive and do it graciously.
Oh, now that is interesting.
I mean, we see it most particularly with Michael. I think I started looking for it because they remind me quite a lot in this snark and spat, too wise to woo peaceably mode of Peter and Harriet in Happy's Carcass, which is a Dorothy Sayers, for anyone who thought we'd got too far without me referencing a murder mystery novel.
Okay.
But that they do much the same thing. They hurl things back and forth. And somewhere in one of these little things, it always gets appended to the end of the books in a letter by Lord Peter's uncle. He says the hard thing to do is to give, is to receive graciously. It's much easier to give. And I thought, I feel like that's a lot what this is about. Because here's Michael, who instinctively can't bring himself to be vulnerable, to give, to apologize, but who can so easily, make that napkin holder, but he doesn't want help, right, because to help is to bring down those walls and to let Maria in.
Right.
And Max, yes, similarly, who can't let in his mother, but can give her back the toy house.
Right.
And yes, we get a couple of moments like that. And as a sort of nice counterpoint, Kyle, who, he doesn't want to talk about what's happened, is reasonably gracious,
yes,
about receiving the help he's given. And who finds, a way to extend an olive branch back to Liz.
Right. Yeah. I'll have to think about that because I don't immediately have a thesis about how all those things are pulled together, but it's definitely interesting as a proposal.
Well, what would you like to start with?
Well, I think I may just kind of start with the toy house since it is the episode title, and you mentioned it in terms of Max and his mother, obviously. And I really felt that was falling flat for me because if it was supposed to be a gesture that would have significance for me, I need it to be built up and referenced beforehand instead of, oh, hey, here's this house, have it back.
Yeah, it's a bit exposition heavy.
Yes.
It's the gift of the toy house. And
the early exposition is spent on so many other things in this episode.
It is. I think what felt weird about it to me is it feels a bit like that moment where you dispel the magic of Father Christmas and admit that maybe there isn't one after all, because Max gives it back to her and says, you told me this was my magic house and it could get me home.
Right.
And I feel like any other show would pick this moment to have some line to the effect of, but I've always been home, you have always been my home, variations thereof, so I don't need it. Max doesn't do that.
No, he doesn't. And I think that it could be really powerful in terms of, I'm growing up, I'm realizing that there's no easy answers. I still haven't found where I belong yet.
Which is great, but that's not what he says. He says, I will never find my home. And I'm left wondering, does he really feel more at home on the alien planet he can't remember than he does with the Evanses? Because I don't think that's what he's saying.
Yeah, it's a confusing message no matter how you try to parse it, I think. And I'm also left very frustrated with kind of the way we leave things with Diane with kind of the notion of, well, with Max kind of sending the message that no, we will never be able to trust her with this.
Yes, which comes from, I suppose, that really interesting, very painful place of Michael's. There's no such thing as unconditional love. And Michael obviously believes it. He obviously means it.
Right.
And yet, for him to see that's true, there is something so fundamentally
Alienating.
alienating there. Yes.
It sets the three of them apart, and Isabel is the only one who is rebelling against that
I think
this week.
I think what we see this week is the degrees of integration that these three have managed. And
Right.
Isabel seems to have done the most thorough job of all of them. I mean, we sort of knew that because we've seen
Yes.
her go on many and various dates, and she's got friends at school that aren't Liz and Maria.
Yes.
She has more of a life.
Yes.
So it makes sense that she wants to try and create that synthesis with her mother. To
Yes.
say, actually, this is what I am, love me anyway.
Yes. Whereas Max and Michael, both in their different ways, seem to be trying to undo the various ways that their worlds have collided with Liz's and Maria's, and to be building that wall of separation again.
Yes.
Which is kind of heartbreaking to me because the way that these couples improve each other is one of my favorite things about the show.
Yes, they bring out the best parts of each other, and yet Michael is determined he needs to be Stonehenge, so we can't.
Yes.
That's not a place we go.
Stonehenge?
No, something like that. You know what I mean. Hadrian's Wall.
Yes, Hadrian's Wall, yes.
I can do architecture, I promise.
Yes. If you did want to be Stonehenge, again, that would be an interesting story, but that's not this one.
That's a different show.
Yes.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, yeah, so I think I mentioned that I wanted to be tracking how Max deals with taking a step back from Liz last time, and we see that here, that it seems to be very much he's frightened enough to try to cut off as much attachment as he can, although I did notice that Diane mentioned that Liz had been around at the house the other day.
Yes, so they're obviously still on speaking terms anyway.
Yes.
Even
and
if
biology lab partners.
Yes, even if they're supremely awkward.
Which was how they started. Yes.
Yes, I suppose that's true, isn't it? I'm sort of wondering now if they've just been assigned for the year.
Possibly.
And that isn't a thing that's happened.
I would find it a little surprising if a class like that would go all the way through the year, but possibly it would in American schools.
I had one once that did, but that was an English class, and that was a particular quirk of the teacher.
Right.
I too would find it weird unless you had assigned seating all the way through.
Right. Yes.
But
And
oh, go on.
yeah, it was just kind of in the same vein. There seems to be a lot in terms of time that we have skipped over here since Balance was mid-December and this is now mid-January, so the holidays presumably have passed by without anything of particular note happening.
Nothing too drastic, presumably.
Yes.
That did bother me because I didn't pick up that it was January, but Isabel was still going about in turtlenecks. And it's got to still be winter, right? Because
Yes.
it must be cold and the heat wave can't still be a thing, please tell me.
No, I definitely think not.
Yeah, the geography of Roswell might be a lost cause, but the timeline, also a thing I need, and that's a bit more easy to pin down.
Yeah, I did really love the notion of how Maria feels a great longing for closeness, particularly with her mother, that she can't seem to explain to Max.
Yes. This idea that mothers and daughters are sort of a unit in a way that their sons and brothers just don't grasp.
Right.
Which, I mean, it makes sense to me because I was once given a book to read by my mother called You Just Don't Understand, and it talked about, among other things, or maybe it was another one, but the writer was Deborah Tannen anyway, but how mothers treat their daughters the way they wouldn't treat anyone else. And daughters, it's reciprocally true.
Right.
And you say things you would never say to other people to your mother.
Right.
So it was a nice detail to bring that up, and you do get that sense of connection, particularly between Isabel and Diane.
Yes. Rather coincidentally, I've started a rewatch of another Jason Kadam series, Parenthood, which has a lot of family relationships in it, and it's mentioned kind of as a thesis statement in some of the earlier episodes that all teenage girls hate their mothers.
I don't know. I didn't hate mine, but
Right.
but it's certainly a theory I've heard put about.
Right. Yes. Yes, I think like all generalizations, it.
But what is it? Every rule allows of an exception, and that's a rule.
Yes.
But no, I absolutely adore that speech Isabel's given, to her mother about when you came, you were like the sun,
Yes.
all in yellow and warm, and I don't know,
Yes.
it does so much more than it sounds like it should, that speech.
Yes. Yes, it does. It also could be interpreted as pulling on Diane's heartstrings to get her to stop asking the questions that she was asking.
Oh, it absolutely is, but I don't think
Yes.
for a minute that makes it untrue.
True. Yes. Yes.
It's
And
that kind of
yep.
heightened empathy we've talked about before.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, Maria and Michael's back and forth, I felt did actually work for me very well, even though I'm a little disappointed at Michael's position at this point. But it's an understandable one, and we will get to see him shift over the next little bit.
Yeah, no, I love their scenes together. There's a lot of warmth in them, even if they are being snarky and
Yes.
bickering and striving to reenact Much Ado About Nothing by way of napkin rings,
Yes.
napkin holders.
Yeah, I did wonder, and I've referenced this in the intro, that every time I was taking woodshop class, like after your project was graded, you were certainly free to take it home if you wanted to. And so I kind of wondered at Maria's reply, which kind of implied that she had the choice between getting the grade from Michael's napkin holder or getting to keep it, and she chose to keep it.
Oh, see, I was just going to say that Maria's napkin holder was such a doomed affair that she chose to reject it out of hand and not reclaim it. But yeah, if she can't, her line about Michael's one does contradict that.
Right.
It is an odd one.
Yes. On the other hand, I could also see if, even if she didn't phrase it this way, that she would happily accept it as a gift, but would not want to be getting graded on a gift.
I think that's maybe what it is, because she does seem to have a deep sense of integrity where it comes to this. No, you can't just wave your hand over it and make it go away, because that would be cheating.
Right.
Which I
Yes.
love also for that double meaning that you have to accept the consequences of your actions,
Yes.
which none of them is prepared to do in this episode. None, certainly not Max, Michael, Isabel.
Right.
Really, somebody should be telling Diane, oh, by the way, we are aliens, but
Yes.
they can't do
Yes.
that because that would expose them, so they're just not talking
Yes.
about it, which is the
Yes.
worst way of dealing with it they can think of, because as Isabel says, that pulls Diane away. They start to lose her.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to admit, I kind of really believe that if they told her in the right way and gave her some time to deal with it, she could accept it just as well as Liz and Alex could, and Maria for that matter. But on the other hand, that would make it a very different kind of show.
It would. I think that's just not the story we're telling, so it's not what we're doing, but it's frustrating because I
It
absolutely
is.
believe she would be on their
Yes.
side given enough time and space.
Yes.
And yet, it doesn't feel, I mean, it doesn't feel like false conflict to me in the same way that Max and Liz will later feel a bit like false conflict at the crashdown.
Right.
Because really, if he's worried that she's going out with Kyle, he just needs to ask, and yet A, it's none of his business. C, B, she doesn't need his permission, and C, that's not what's happening there anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't too upset with that just because I didn't really feel like it was an important note of conflict
No.
anyway. One other thing to do with Maria and Michael, and then we can move on, is that she was talking about how, well, it seems she was very clearly jealous about the fact that Isabel got a hug after Michael was healed and she didn't. And was just thinking that it's a bit of a shame that she couldn't get to see Michael's vision and the passionate kiss that he got from Vision Maria in that one.
Yes, it really is, because as we know, Michael isn't spectacularly demonstrative at the best of times.
Yes.
And yeah, it'll be something to track the way those flashes work, I guess, and who gets to see
Yes.
what.
Yes.
But it's sort of funny because he says something to imply that he's not indebted to her.
Right.
And yet he sort of is, because had she not been there, there's no guarantee that that balance trick would have worked.
Yeah, and I don't really understand exactly what the significance is of saying that it's a tactic, and kind of if it's a tactic, then why is that necessarily a bad thing?
I don't know. I think Michael's mind is just very militaristic.
Yeah.
um,
But on the other hand, militaristically, a tactic is usually a good thing.
well, yeah, you'd think so, having a plan. He just seems aggrieved that there is a plan that involves ensnaring his attention, I suppose.
Right.
And one that involves potentially lowering his defenses. That might be it, more than the fact
Yes.
that there's a plan in the first place. It's one that's supposed to make him vulnerable.
Yes. Yeah, actually, it's possible that what's more true is that turning that accusation back on her is a tactic on his part, that he is trying to get her to feel defensive to delegitimize the debt that he owes her because that makes him feel uncomfortable in some way.
Yes, and I think that's where they remind me of Whimsy and Harriet, because initially Lord Peter gets her out of prison and then says, "Will you marry me?" And she says, "Well, I can't do that. I'm now indebted to you. Don't you understand? That can never be a thing." And
Right.
they have to end up on equal footing, and it makes a wonderful story. But I feel a bit of the same with Michael and Maria in spots, that they need always to be on equal footing with each other.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely
And
do
when they're
have this
not,
kind of tracking who owes who, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Which oddly reminds me a little bit of Nita and Kid in the Young Wizards Diane Duane books, who at some point decide to stop counting who's saved whose life the most times because it really doesn't matter.
Well, that's really what they just need to declare here.
Yes.
Something similar, isn't it?
Yeah.
The running tally is null and void.
Yes.
And yet, if they did that, I think that spark would go and it would be, I don't know, we'd be disappointed.
Yes. Yeah, so for the Liz and Kyle stuff, I was tracking to see if Kyle is the worst in this episode.
No, I think he
And
comes out okay.
yeah, though I did groan when he was telling her the fib about how long his leg was going to be hurt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he
But
has
definitely
moments.
redeemed that with kind of the no, you were straight with me and I was an ass to not accept the fact that you had the right to break up with me.
Yes.
And I really did like how Liz's response came from I'd broken up with Kyle without thinking enough of his feelings, and now that things have gone south with Max, I have more sympathy with that place.
Yes, and there's such wonderful warmth between them and a real sense of, I don't know, just almost their private shorthand with each other from when they went out as they start to reconnect.
Yes, yes. And I
It's
think
nice to see them reconnect, certainly.
it is, yes. Though I think that unfortunately the graph in this respect will not be smooth.
No, lots of spikes involved, but for the time
Yes,
being, this is more the Kyle I remember liking.
right. Valenti is kind of being remarkably straightforward for him, even mentioning the healing theory to Diane, which I think he's never actually said out loud to anyone else other than Agent
Well, not
Stevens.
since Agent Stevens said, "Remember what happened to your father."
Yeah,
You don't want to end that way, you could lose your career over it. Although, I don't know how I feel about him just cavalierly showing her police records. I'm sure that's against at least one rule of something or other that matters.
yes, but it will probably not. It will almost certainly not be the last time.
Oh, no, definitely not. Shall we talk about healing the pigeon?
Okay, yes.
Because Max says something later when Michael accuses him of being Dr. Dolittle that suggests that he wasn't trying to heal it. Or he kind of did it by accident.
Right.
And yet, when you look at him on the video, he seems to have picked it up with the intent of healing it.
Yeah, no, I think that it wasn't so much that he wasn't trying, but that he either had no idea that he could, or that he didn't realize that it was special that he could.
Oh, that makes sense. The way you can, yeah. The way some children can, I don't know, wiggle their ears or whatever, to just take for granted
Yes.
that that's
Yes.
something everyone can do.
Yes.
I did have so many questions about that. Does the pigeon end up handprinted too? Would nobody else have noticed? All sorts of things. All of which, of course, completely undermine the plot and are totally irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, logically, either the print would be on the feathers, in which case it would possibly fade. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it fades fairly quickly anyway. If it shows up on the skin under the feathers, then it would be very hard to see anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't imagine anyone's going to be looking all that much or all that
Yes.
closely to Pigeon.
Right.
One among thousands.
Yeah, I like the notion of it having this tiny little kid-sized handprint on it.
I do too. I'm also sort of delighted by the VHS because whatever filter they put on it, it really does look like a home video
Right, yes.
in a way the rest of the show just doesn't. Of course, that might have been me watching on a tablet, but
Yeah, no, I think that fit, and it kind of was still in the era where kind of the VHS effect would have been fairly standard.
yeah,
It may have been something to do with kind of the fact of viewing it through two slightly different frame rates.
or something, yeah.
Okay, so is it time for picking an MVP?
Yes. I think we'd better.
All right.
I am now knocking over objects on the desk, so it's probably a sign of something.
Okay. So I would think that as delightful as Michael and Maria are in this one, I would kind of say that it has to be either Jason, Catherine, or whoever it is who actually plays Diane, who I don't remember
Oh,
offhand.
I'm so glad I'm not the only one to come up short there. But I think you're right.
Quick check on IMDb. Go into the full cast listing because she's not a regular. Mary Ellen Trainor. Yes, I did actually notice that name when I was watching and then had forgotten it again.
Well caught.
And I would think my instinct is actually to give it to Mary Ellen.
I do very much like her performance in this.
Yes.
And it's good to get to see more of her, and she does really well what they give her to do, so I could see that argument.
Yes. Though noticeably missing in this episode are both Mr. Evans and Alex, but I guess there isn't room enough for everybody.
It's okay, we explained Mr. Evans away before the grease fire even started.
Oh, right, that he's
Otherwise, there wouldn't
traveling
have been
on
one
business. Yes.
because of all the garlic.
Yes.
So that's...
Yes, I do wonder exactly what it is that takes Mr. Evans' law practice out of town so often.
I don't know, maybe he's got clients abroad? If he's a corporate lawyer, I can see that happening.
Yeah.
If he's having to go to them a lot.
Yeah, probably not abroad as in overseas, but places like Albuquerque and Santa Fe.
Yeah,
certainly.
abroad is the wrong word, away from home.
Yes. For episode ratings,
What have you come up with? What do you give it?
2 tiny handprint pigeons.
I like that. Okay. I'll give it 3 elaborate napkin holders.
Excellent.
If you agree or disagree with us, you can get in touch via Twitter at @alienscast, or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/alienscast, or visit our blog at alienscast.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, please link to us on your blog, on Twitter, Facebook, wherever else you are on the internet. You can leave us a review on iTunes and help other Roswellians find us. Our theme music is Epic Trailer Intro by Honey Lemon.
This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Find out more by searching for Creative Commons.
I'm Chris Coworth.
And I'm Claire, and this is Illegal Aliens, a Roswell podcast. Join us next Monday, July 10, 2017, for a discussion of the 12th episode of Season 1, Into the Woods.
In which Maria explores alternative lingerie and Michael tries the "You're my father" line on the wrong.